that unit is produce yeast-based bakery products. And we're changing the way that we're production. We're using formulas instead of recipes. There is a lot of timing involved, and it is a very different way to learn. And also, you know, you've got essentially 5 lessons to get your head around this subject, which I feel again is a high order skill set. There's a lot of knowledge needed. So the goal with this unit is to build the foundations of skill and knowledge behind fermented doughs, behind fermented enriched doughs, bulk fermented doughs, long fermented doughs, rapid doughs. So these sessions now will be I'll be doing a lot of underpinning theory for the first couple of weeks, and then we'll do some more videos on molding and dough making. So a few things that we need to, and the jargon, that industry jargon, which is the language that we use, is a little bit different too. So patisserie and bread baking, even though they sit together, they are very different in the systems. You know, you're not using recipes, you're using formulas, and you'll see one coming up. We're mixing, developing gluten, hydrating, scaling, molding, proving, and baking. Right, so that process doesn't change within this discipline or this unit of learning. So the products and methods of production, they are a little bit different to what we have done before, where it's been recipe based and there's a lot of form and filling and, you know, decorating, for example. We will spend a little bit of time on calculating formula and how to understand how to do that, which is quite liberating if you're working doing croissant or vanoiserie, like sweet laminated doughs and sweet doughs. Not so much sourdough production. We'll have a little look at that. We're lucky that Connor is practicing for the world skills, so I'll pull him in so we can have a look at his breads. And we can learn as much as we can from him while he's there. Identifying ingredients. So again, we've got these base ingredients, and they all have a different role, and they all are critical for the process of making bread. And I'll explain that a little bit more of that in detail when we have the physical ingredients in front of us. Mixing methods are different. And we've got different stages of production as we go through to that final loaf that we will produce from the types of breads that we're making. This is the session content, meaning this is the content of that whole unit for the next 6 weeks. This is our learning pathway. So we've got, you know, this week is introduction to bread making. We're doing standard white breads. We will be making a baguette. Well, actually, we're not making a baguette. We're going to make a batard. A batard is a small baguette. So we'll start with small steps. So we've got batard, and then we've got some savoury breads, and we'll be doing some milk buns. Milk buns is what most likely you would use for a burger, for example. Session 2, we've got sweet and enriched doughs. We'll be doing hot cross buns. Good timing, right before Easter. And we'll be doing some filled sweet buns with cream, jam, icing, and those sorts of things. Session 3, brioche and savrins. And we'll look at rhubarb as well on that lesson. And we will review and make a baguette. Okay, so that we have 2 chances of practicing our moulding skills for the assessment for that baguette. Session 4, we've got laminated doughs, which is croissant and Danish, sweet and savoury. And then lesson 5, we've got a second session where we'll be making laminated doughs again, but we'll be making them for the assessment. So we get 2 sessions on that, because that is, like the puff pastry, that requires a fair bit of practice and just to embed that concept of not only laminating, but we're also controlling fermentation. We'll also be making the brioche for the assessment, bulk fermented, and then we've got 1 practical assessment. So that's really great. Rather than losing too much time to assessment, we have that opportunity on lesson 5 to start producing for that main event, and then we've got that practical assessment on session 6. So this is the assessment. It's good to look at what we need to do before we start even, right? So we've got the baguette and rolls. So we've got dough number 1. We've got 2 products that we'll get out of that dough, 4 baguettes and 12 rolls. There's the second dough, which is the saverins, and we'll be just doing little donuts that'll be decorated. Brioche dough. We've got Parisians, and we've also got just small brioche buns. And then we have croissant, the laminated dough. Out of that, we'll get croissant, savory croissant, pain chocolat, which is a chocolate croissant, and some Danish pastries. So that makes up what you'll be presenting in that session. This is what we're doing for this week. So we're getting a bit of an understanding of just producing white style breads. So we will make a bulk fermented dough, and out of that, it says there baguette, but we'll be doing batards. We're just going to do a shorter version. The difference between a baguette and a batard: a baguette has a certain length and a certain amount of cuts. A batard is a shorter version, and that has a certain amount of cuts as well. The bread rolls that we'll be making, we will be doing like little individual style baguettes rolls, and we'll be practicing our cutting. I'm cutting like this because we cut on an angle. Steaming, baking, getting a bit of a handle on the new baking conditions that are required for this type of bread. Then we've got soft rolls, which is normally it has fat in the roll. So the first bread is quite lean. The second dough is enriched. That's why it's soft. If it's lean, it's crunchy and dry. If it's soft, it's enriched. Normally has sugar, fat, milk powders, things like that. And out of that, we'll get dinner rolls, sesame seed rolls, and savory rolls. And then the third dough, final dough of the day, is milk buns. Now, that looks like a lot, but don't forget, we are working on the big machines, which are designed to making bread, and I'll demonstrate that tomorrow. And we're working in benches, right? So this is a little bit different of a style of education that we will. It's a different style to every other unit, right? But you would expect that, right? So every time we do a unit, it changes the way that we weigh up, the way that we produce the product, the way that we, form and fill or prove or laminate, and then finally bake and finish. Okay, this is the other slide that we'll be looking at now, and just to have a look at what information that you need to gather every lesson, but also this is a requirement for the assessment. So instead of a workflow where we have been writing down instructions, we have a very detailed timing regime. I'll embed that tomorrow and we stick to it. But we have to get this down. It is the fundamental system of controlling fermentation. You want to control fermentation. You don't want fermentation to be controlling you. You need to control these doughs. The biggest problem I see in industry is once you start to get to a certain volume, you lose control of the fermentation process, where you really, through temperature and timing, you can control that whole process and do massive scale. You can see on right, we've got lots of grids for times. I'll instruct that tomorrow. But on the left, you've got this like timeline, and that's pretty much set down as a fundamental way of producing fermented goods or bread fermented doughs. We've got the flour and ingredients. Of course, we've got way up. Then we've got mixing and dough development. Then we've got a recovery period. So the difference with making doughs to what we've done before is that we really put gluten through a fairly abusive process of mixing. We talked a little bit about it with the puff pastry dough, where and also when we laminated in between turns, we had to rest the gluten. And this was called, the jargon for that is, it's a recovery when we're doing bread. Once we've got recovery, then we've got scaling. So we get those portions. If it's bread roll, for example, 12 at 100 grams. So we did that portioning and rounding. And I'll show you that molding technique during the week. Then we've got intermediate proof, which is a proof or a time period where it actually starts to produce CO2 gas, starts to make air bubbles, and we want to trap those. And then we've got final molding, and that's where we mold the shape of whatever bread type that we're doing. It goes into a proofer or a proof cycle, and that is the cabinets that we've been using them only as fridges. So now we're going to use them for the actual purpose, which is to proof bread. And that's a combination of humidity and temperature together. And we can actually time this depending on the dough temperature, the room temperature, and those sorts of things. We have that final proof, and then the final stage for us is it goes in the oven and it bakes. So for us, that's we do have a cooling and bagging, and there is other things that happen after it, but essentially I just want to get this process down so that we can understand at least the fundamentals of making bread, and then we can move on to other doughs. Baking is different. Baking is very different. It's hotter, a lot hotter. You can see the temperature there, 240 degrees, right? We haven't really gone too much over 200. And then you've got the settings. We can understand that. So we've got, for square blocks of bread, which is sandwich bread, 40% distribution of heat on the bottom, 100 at the front, and 40 on the top, 100 on the front, and 50 on the bottom. And you can see the bake time's quite long, right? It's nearly half an hour. So we need to also time that. Then there's the Viennas, cobs, sticks, crusties, and they normally bake from 210 to 230 even. And you can see here we've got steam. So we will be using the steam function, and we'll implement the flue for things that are crusty. Remember, with the choux pastry, we use that flue to dry the choux out. Here we've got that system. If I want a soft roll, then I'll leave the flue shut. The moisture's all trapped in there. If I want something dry, I'll evacuate that excessive moisture in the chamber, and therefore it'll be crusty, right? And then we've got the rolls. I will do these types of presentations. I'll try and keep them as short as I can, and then this is really an introduction. I'll get a little bit deeper in into ingredient functionality, fermentation, and a few other processes and things that are useful. Even if you don't understand it now, you have it to go back to as you're going through that process of learning how to make all of these baked goods.